Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, you ever have that feeling that you left something undone? Well, today I realized I left something undone. I'm looking at my phone or my whatever the YouTube app is. I think it's like Studio app, and I get some comments on a couple of my Broken Rooms videos that I made some time ago, and they're by Stephen Heron, the creator of the game. And I realized, man, I forgot to make one of the videos. I forgot to make a video on combat. Great game. Didn't make the video on combat. This is a game that I think I answered RPG a Day question number one for 2017. What game do I wish I was playing right now? It was this game, because this game is pretty cool. So I'm going to make a little video on combat and damage and healing. And nothing here is super revolutionary. The combat chapter, when you first look at it, is a little more daunting than it ends up being. That's because most of the chapter is about situational modifiers. But let me go through it really fast just to kind of give you an idea of how combat and how damage works, because a lot of it's pretty gritty, and there's a lot of opposed rolls involved. There's nothing, like I said, really revolutionary. But let me go on and explain it. It's all D12 dice, just like the rest of the game. Initiative is the only thing that really isn't tied to anything else, like an attribute like body, mind, or soul, or particular skill. Initiative is a straight 2D12 roll. Highest roll goes first. That's your initiative place, in the combat for the rest of the combat. So you write all those scores down. Say you roll a 15. Okay, well you're on initiative 15, and it's to tick down in every combat round, highest to lowest. That could change in terms of like how many dice you roll. Only if, say, you got surprise on somebody, you'll add a die. The first surprise round is free. After that, your initiative is higher because you, or potentially higher because you get to roll 3 dice. There's some other qualities that might have you adding a die to your roll. There's some qualities, I suppose, that might have you subtracting a die from your roll. So you have your initiative place for the rest of the combat. You could wait to act and see what other people do, in which case now you've sacrificed your place in the initiative sequence. So say you start out with that 15, but you waited until somebody with a 4 actually acted. Now you act on 3. Well, that's your new place in the initiative sequence. You can also hold an action conditionally and say, well, I'm going to wait until this happens, and then I'm going to do whatever it is you're going to do. In that place, you've now moved your initiative place, and you don't start again at 15. You start now at 4, wherever it is that you acted. Pretty standard stuff. As far as what you can do in a combat round, it's really, really straightforward and familiar sounding. You get to have one move action, and your move is your, without modifiers, your move is your particular body rating times 5. So if you have a body rating of 3, then you get to move 15 feet in a round. And characters are always assumed to be moving and jumping around and doing all kinds of stuff. They're not just standing there static. But that's how much distance you get to cover. You get to have an attack or standard action per round, and then you have as many defensive actions as you need, with the caveat that the more times you need to defend yourself against people that are trying to kill you or hurt you or whatever, with every successive defensive attempt you need to make, you subtract 1 die from your defense roll. So if you have 3 people attacking you, the first one you get to roll your full dice pool. Second one you have to subtract a die. Next one you have to subtract 2 dice, etc. Pretty standard stuff. And in general, you get to defend against most combat actions. Combat actions are kind of divided up into pretty standard things like gunplay, fisticuffs, melee with weapons, grappling, and meridian attacks, which is the magic system, for lack of a better word, in the game. Defensive actions are things like avoiding, which is getting out of the way of thrown weapons or projectiles, like arrows, blocking, parrying, against armed combat, and then resisting, which is resisting a meridian type attack. You're pretty much, it would be analogous to your saving throw in old D&D or something like that. However, you don't get to roll a defense action against gunfire. Gunplay in this game is really gritty and really realistic and really fatal, because it makes sense. It's hard to dodge out of the way of a bullet. Your characters are not superheroes, unless they've got some kind of meridian which allows them to do that. But that's a whole different kettle of fish, so we're not really going to discuss that here. The same thing goes for like archaic projectiles, like say a bow and arrow. If you're at close range, you can't defend against that. Once you're into like medium and long range, I think the game divides up in something like 5 or 6 ranges. You can actually defend against them at that particular point. But if you're the guy standing right in front of you with your bow and arrow, good luck. You're not going to defend against that. At that point, as far as attacking people, it depends on what you're doing. You're going to use something like your armed combat skill or your unarmed combat skill or your firearm skill, and you need to roll, just like any other skill, you need to roll a bunch of successes in order to actually inflict damage on somebody. It depends, like the firearms is one of the easiest ones to look at. It's just your difficulty is based on the range. You know, if you're at point blank or close range, you're only going to need a difficulty of 1. You need 1 success to actually hit the person. And something like medium is 2, long is 3, you know, extreme is 4, etc. Then goes on to like needing a difficulty number of 5 to actually inflict damage. How much damage you actually inflict, whether it's firearms or, you know, melee weapons or whatever, depends upon the damage rating of the weapon. And so every weapon has a damage rating. You use something like, say, a handgun, I think has a damage rating of 2. And so the amount of damage you actually inflict on somebody is the damage rating of the weapon plus any net successes. So that success is over and above your target number. So say you're trying to hit somebody at, let's say, long range. You need to have a difficulty of 3. If you roll 3 successes, great. You've just hit them with your handgun, so you inflict 2 points of damage. However, body damage, by the way. If you rolled 5 successes at that point, then you've got 2 next successes. So now you've inflicted 4 points of damage. That just, you know, reflects you hitting them in a more vital area. Then there's a whole bunch of situational modifiers for every type of attack. And there, you know, that's what makes a chapter look so big. It's like things like using a firing stance and taking time to aim, or a called shot, which can be very effective. It increases the number of successes you need quite a bit. However, at the end of the day, then the damage you inflict is as if you had a difficulty of 0. So it can be very fatal, but it's really hard to do. It's a called shot. And, you know, burst fire, running with a weapon, attacking in a furious manner, you know, where you're not really defending yourself, or attacking, being mostly on the defensive, etc. As far as defense checks go, they can be based on a number of things, like your athletics, or I'm trying to think of what else here off the top of my head, but, you know, it's various skills that, you know, it will allow you to defend better, or blocking or whatever. I'm trying to think of what else. Unarmed combat skill would be applicable, or armed combat skill would be applicable when you're parrying. And in that case, your successes are attempting to negate the successes of your opponent. If they score 0, then they don't hit you. I think like the firearm skill, because it's a difficulty number at that point, it's not just a straight up opposed combat roll. It wouldn't be firearms, but say if they're trying to shoot you with a bow and arrow, and they have a difficulty of 3 at that point, they're at that longer range. If you're scoring more successes than they are, you're negating. You may end up not completely tying with them, but you may end up getting to the point where they don't score those 3 successes they need to hit you, so you've effectively blocked the attack at that point. The only thing that you need to score above your attacker in is the meridian type effects, when they're trying to affect you with some kind of meridian attack, and that depends. You know, those can run the gamut for what they are. So in order to make that save, if you will, you know, if the guy has a difficulty number of 3 to affect you with a meridian attack, then you need to roll at least 4 successes in order to negate that. And then, you know, like I said, the modifiers are pretty common sense, and it goes through a whole bunch of things, cover, etc. As far as the damage is concerned, well, your damage can happen to your 3 primary attributes. It can happen to your mind, your body, or your soul. A lot of combat is body damage, but there could be other combat or dangerous situations, you know, where it affects your mind or it affects your soul. And this could be in a lot of meridian type attacks, you know, horrific situations, etc. The game goes into more detail in terms of like what might cause these damage. Now, you actually have damage trackers. The amount of damage you can take before you know, you're in serious trouble, you hit 0, and you're at that life or death or going insane moment, is equal to the attribute score times 3. So it takes a lot of you know, when you're choosing like how you want to arrange your attributes in terms of which one has a rating of 3, which one has a rating of 4, which one has a rating of 5. That has a lot of impact on your skills. It also has a lot of impact on how much damage you can take, like how tough you are, physically, intellectually, and like psychologically, in terms of like things like soul damage. And so, like if you have a rating of 3, well, you can take 9 points of damage in that particular attribute. If 4 would be 12, and 5 would be 15. Now, there's actually thresholds for damage where you start to take penalties. So it's kind of one of those games that has a bit of a, I hate to use the term death spiral, but you know, it's not like D&D where you just can take a whole bunch of hit points of damage and finally, oh, you're dead. It's one of those games where you start to take penalties, and it's based on the multiples of that of your attribute. So, for example, if you have an attribute rating of 4, you can take 4 points of damage before you're just at the point where you're going to hit this first threshold. Up to 4 points of damage, you don't have any penalties. But once you take that 5th point of damage, you've gone into that next tier or category. for lack of a better word, at that 5 point of damage level, now you're taking -1 die hits to everything. So every time you try to do something, you're taking a -1 die hit to the, that particular to your action checks. Once you take you get down to the point where you have taken 9 points, so you've crossed that next threshold. Now you're taking -2 die hits to everything with an attribute level of 4, and once you've hit 13, you're below 0 in your damage tracker. You're taking -3 die hits if you're still conscious. You're really, really affected. And at that point, whatever attribute that you've gone over gone past 0, and you need to take you need to make a challenging roll on that attribute. This is the one time you don't actually take penalties. You need to score at least 2 successes just to stay conscious. Either you're physically just knocked out, or psychologically you've just kind of gone over the deep end and you're not even conscious at that point. At that point, you're in serious trouble. You've got to be stabilized. You can stabilize yourself by making an extended roll at Daunting. You need 3 successes, but you have 3 rounds to do that. If you don't do that, you're either dead or permanently insane, permanently just shot, and you're no longer a playable character. Or other characters can go into your rescue and attempt things like first aid or some psychiatry roll or a psychology or empathy roll, and they have to score 2 successes. And I think they've got something like 3 turns before you're just unplayable, like you've either died or you've gone around the twist. There's something else you can actually do though to avoid the that negative consequence, which is pretty heavy-duty consequence, is you can do what's called bargaining, and you can take a temporary or perhaps permanent flaw, which would be in game terms a negative quality, and it would be relevant to that particular attribute that just got really zapped. So you may end up with a limp or like a horrific scar if it's body damage, or you could end up with some serious psychological trauma and maybe disorders if it's like soul damage or mind damage or what have you. So you can actually bargain your way out of that, like a lot of other games, but at a significant cost to your character. Then, as far as healing is concerned, healing can go either way. Healing can be very slow if you're doing it without any kind of aid. And in fact, physical healing is the one that's the most daunting. Once per week, you make a roll, and you see whether or not you heal a point, or if you fail that, you actually take another point of damage. So you can actually die after you manage to live through an encounter. You just got to be that beat up or that sick. Even if you never get down to negative, you can just be that, get infected. As far as psychological or what have you, it's tougher to heal from that spontaneously. A lot of times you need professional help. And professional help in healing physically, well, then you're making a roll every single day to see whether you just heal. You don't actually take more damage. As far as they handle the various attributes, body, mind, or soul, a little bit differently in terms of how fast you heal, based on getting like physical help or psychological help. You might heal like a couple points a week. Physical, I think, is like 1 point a day. But with professional help, you can actually heal. And then the book at the end goes on to, or that chapter at the end goes on to list a whole bunch of standard environmental hazards that could cause all kinds of body damage. And it's a typical like falling, poison, blizzards, environmental conditions, radiation, because you look at all the various variants of the near side. There's all kinds of environmental threats that you can run into. So of the particular interest, though, are things to me like the bravery checks. There are times when you might have to make a bravery check, like if it's a really bizarre or crazy situation, and it's pretty much a soul defense check that you have to make. It's based on your psychological fortitude, how brave you are. And if you fail a bravery check, you're just unable to take an action. So your character may just kind of freeze and be unable to do what they want to do because it's just the situation is so freaky. That's one of those reasons. Like it's really, as you're creating a character, you got to wonder, okay, I've got this guy that's really strong, really, he's got a body of 5, and maybe I give him this intellect of 4. Like, okay, he's not stupid either. Not that 3 is stupid, but I've given him a soul of 3, and then he's a little afraid. Like things can really freak him out. He doesn't have that kind of mental or intestinal fortitude to get through things. He might fail a bravery check. And there are there's a list of things that you can actually take soul damage from, and one of them is failing a bravery check. You'll take 4 points of soul damage from failing a bravery check. So you start to have your confidence just totally shaken. There's other things you'll take soul damage from, like meeting a variant self for the first time. You'll take from somewhere from 2 to 4 soul damage just from the shock of meeting a variant of yourself from a different Earth. Meeting a variant loved one might be 2 soul damage. Killing a variant loved one, 8 soul. Killing a variant self, like say you meet another version of yourself. Maybe they're not a nice guy and they're out to kill you, but you finally kill them. You'll take 10 soul damage. This is a freaky event, killing yourself. Also looks at mind damage, which can be a little bit, at first you're like, what causes mind damage? It's generally things that affect your ability to focus and concentrate. They got a list of things here, like mental attacks from a reader, some of the reading meridian, or if you've suffered lag from a high friction broken room, because some broken rooms have a tremendous amount of lag, and you exit out the other side, if you will, pretty beat up. Viewing traumatic or horrible events can cause an amount of mind damage because you're just unable to focus at that point. And not so much like soul damage where it's breaking your confidence. It's just, you're just horrified by what you've just seen. Viewing a paradoxical event, and you will view some paradoxical events if you play this game and you travel from room to room, variant to variant. And things like some kind of stun attack, like a taser. A lot of non-lethal weapons will still fry your brain quite a bit, and so you may take a bunch of mind damage. I can think of a bunch of others, like drug usage or something, or some other effects from poisons and what have you. So a lot of different ways you can take mind damage in the game. So, really cool stuff in here. So for the most part, the combat healing chapter pretty standard, but with some unusual twists based on the nature of this game. So yeah, video's long overdue. Sorry about that, but at the end of the day, not a complex system. A lot of opposed roles. A couple tweaks here and there. And even if you don't completely memorize, I'll never memorize all these situational modifiers. It's really easy to kind of eyeball them after a while. Yeah, okay, -2 die hit here, or maybe we increase the difficulty by 1. Pretty standard stuff.